Black like me. Black like me. Black like me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Hey, good people. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. I am really excited about today's guest and today's program. As you know, we're in season 10, so we're celebrating the fact that we've got close to 200 episodes that are up. We've been fortunate enough to win a few awards. People are listening and have downloaded our podcast from 130 countries around the world. And the theme that's carrying us for this season 10 is Say It Loud. And so it's just about the importance of celebrating Black culture and our contributions to the world and to the nation. But the podcast is called Black Like Me. So every once in a while, I like to bring in guests who are not necessarily Black, but whose stories help to amplify what it is our podcast is wanting to do. And it's also showing cultural similarities. Not everything that is different is different on every front or every point. And so we're going to dive into some really interesting conversations today. My special guest who will not disappoint is none other than Dr. Dave Gibbons. I'm so glad that Dave is here. Dave wears so many hats. We've been friends for decades. Dave is a thought leader. He's a pastor. He's a social innovator. He directs social impact movements, not only in the United States, but around the world. He's motivated leaders who are doing work in South America, in Asia. In fact, I've seen some of his work in Bangkok. Dave pastors a church that at one time was considered one of the fastest growing, most diverse churches in the country. And he's able to touch people from all walks of life, whether people are coming from Hollywood or Wall Street or from communities that are limited because of the lack of resources. He's just known as a person that can bridge gaps and bring people together. Today, I'm talking with him about his newly released book, The Shape of My Eyes, a memoir of race, faith, and finding myself. Dave Gibbons, welcome to Black Like Me podcast, brother.
Oh, man, it's so great to be with you. And hey, who told you I wasn't Black?
Oh, you know what? That's right, Dave. I'm so sorry. I messed that up. No, Dave, you are right. You are. Listen, I hung out with you. I should know this, man. I should know this. Dave, man, I've been waiting for you to get on this podcast since I found out that your book was coming out. I'm glad that your publicist and publishers wanted you to do this as well. And so I'm handing you back your black race card. I'm sorry for taking that from you. But I'm going to need my Korean American card. I'm going to need my Korean American card too.
Hey, you got to think about my city, man. I was born in Seoul.
That's right. You a Seoul man. Oh, man, Dave, it's so good to have you here. I normally start off so many of my conversations with Black icebreakers, just to have some fun with things. So I want to ask you a couple of questions. One, do Black people jump out of perfectly good airplanes?
Not if they're Alex G.
So, Dave, you talked me into jumping out of a perfectly good plane, which is not something that we readily do as Black people. But just for my listeners, many of whom are non-Black, non-Asian, I just want to verify, did I or did I not jump out of a plane with you, I don't know, about 15 years ago?
Yes. After he called his mom.
Come on, Dave, we didn't have to go there. Listen, in the Black community, we don't jump out of planes without calling our mamas. We might have to say,
he's going home with these.
I did jump out of the plane. But in all fairness, Dave, that was the first attempt. Remember, there was a cloud cover, so we didn't jump that day. But the next time I came out, when I jumped, I did not call Mama G. I did not call Mama G. Oh my goodness. And listen, but Dave, that was some of the best fun I had. So of our group, I was the first to jump. You and I were in two different planes, and your first parachute didn't open.
Yeah, it looked like an exclamation point.
Man, it was, listen, had that taken place first, this brother would have stayed on the ground. There is no way, how does Radar used to say that on MASH, in HE double hockey sticks. No way would I have jumped out of an airplane had I known your chute. You had to, your jump instructor, jump master had to go to the backup parachute. Man, listen, I almost crapped myself for you. So you can imagine what I've been doing, what I would have done. So Dave, let me ask you, NASCAR is known as a pretty white field. Do black people race cars? Do they race stock cars? Do black people do that?
I haven't noticed in the professional circuit yet too many.
But you took me racing some of those smaller cars, so we're working our way up. So I'm trying to be a trailblazer. So this is before we jumped out of a plane together. Remember, Dave, you took us to a place where we were racing those little, they weren't quite, NASCARs, but man, they went pretty fast. Those cars could scoot. So I'm just laughing because my friend Dave is an innovator. He's Korean American. As he said, was born in Seoul, raised in the U.S. But he has a way of talking folks into things out of their comfort zones, into doing things that they don't normally do, like driving these race cars or jumping out of airplanes or doing other kinds of things. But Dave, man, we have had so much fun together. I think the last time I saw you, Dave, was at your book signing, which was wonderful, in LA. And then before that, I saw you here in Madison because you surprised me and flew off for my mom's funeral services. I was not expecting to see you. It's February, it's Wisconsin, you live in Southern California. My sister came in my office and the lady said, Alex, come out, you got to see something, you got to see someone. And when I came out and saw you, man, it floored me. So I just love the fact that not only have you been a friend that's inspired and encouraged me, but you've listened to me and stood with me in some very tough times, man. And I really appreciate you, Dave, more than you realize.
Well, we had to definitely honor your mama.
Yes.
She was a rare one, a legend. So, and then also, of course, man, I wanted to make sure I was there with you.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate it. Well, listen, Dave, we can get right into your book because I want to leave enough time to talk about it. Folks, we're going to have a link so that you can purchase this book. But I love the name of it, The Shape of My Eyes. I read it before it was released. I was fortunate enough to see a manuscript so I could read through it. For interviews, you try to get as much of a book in as you can, but I read the entire book. This wasn't skimming. This wasn't, someone, outlining it for me. I read the entire book because I thought I knew you or had a good understanding of you. But when you read someone's memoir, there's a part of their soul that's in it. And so, we often hear that African-American people, in particular, like holding the culture, talking about culture, singing about culture. And but I want to show my listeners that we're not the only ones that have found culture to be so important. So first of all, just tell me, why did you write this fantastic, memorable memoir? And then I'd love to know what went into the name, The Shape of My Eyes.
Yeah, I think what led me to write it was I had this diagnosis of PTSD. So it's pretty dramatic and traumatic.
Yeah.
As soon as I started thinking about it, when the doctor told me the diagnosis, I said, man, what was traumatic? And then I remember a couple instances. And the next question was, why did I bury this?
Right.
I didn't talk about it. And so I thought I needed to go through my past and my parents' past, get some of my history down. And so the memoir was a good way for me to start just processing things.
How long did it take you to write it from the moment you said I need to do this to when it was actually completed?
It was about 4 years. Yeah, I started during the pandemic, and I remember I just holed myself up at a house for a couple of weeks and just pumped it out, wrote it all out.
Wow.
And then the next several years was just editing it, working with a publisher and making sure that, every party felt good about it.
Yeah, Dave, one of the interesting things that I'd like to discuss with you is this podcast helps a lot of folks, particularly those folks who are Euro-American, who are white, to understand why is it so important for people of color to talk about culture. And what I often remind them is we all have culture. Most of it is disclosed by looking at someone's last name. Like, are you Irish? Are you Czech? You're Italian? Are you French? Are you German? But a lot of folks, particularly from Northern Europe or from all over Europe, but particularly Northern Europe, were able to trade their true nationality or their true ethnic identity for being American. And so you could come in and change your name or get jobs, and no one would really know that you were Irish or you were Polish or what have you. But everyone comes from a cultural background. All you have to do is go back to our great grandmas to find out what they cooked and how they sang and how they made clothes and what they planted, because it certainly was connected to culture. But in situations with you and myself and people of color, when we reach out and start talking about our cultural identity, it's because we're trying to save ourselves from some PTSD diagnosis or some crisis of faith or crisis in life. And we realize that if we're going to survive as trailblazers and as successful people who are not white in mainstream white America, we better tag up second base, meaning we better understand and get a deep understanding of our culture and who we really are in the world in order to move ahead. And so that's what comes to mind, when I started reading your book. It's like, okay, Dave must be ready or must be preparing to go to the next level. Because when you dig deeply into your cultural identity in the way he has in this memoir, and in a manner in which I've not heard you do or convey, it seemed to me that it's how we as people of color steady ourselves in order to balance identity, self, family, and success. I know that's sort of a long lead in, but is that true? Did you find that at this stage in your life, it was important to lay this framework of this is who I am and this is why I am who I am in order to just maintain your own mental wellness and spiritual vibrancy and effectiveness in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I felt there was an incongruity between kind of how I had been conveying myself and seeing myself, and then maybe the way I really am. I think, being raised here in America, I don't mean to be sounding too negative, but I was basically whitewashed. And so I was told to assimilate, like a cyborg or something like that.
Right. You're absolutely right.
And so I think I just adopted things without thinking. And then there's probably moments in my life since I was young where my brain just said, hey, to survive and to make it and to succeed, I just need to flow with things and just try to fit in. And never was my uniqueness really highlighted to say, hey, this is you, man. You need to kind of dig into that. That's really who you are. And so I think I just flowed with the majority culture, which was primarily white. And then there's a right-wing religious type of culture that I grew up in. And so, so I think over time, I had these epiphanies about, not only the color of my skin, but it was more the shape of my eyes. And you'd asked about that. I wrote about the book because a lot of times people talk about the color of skin.
Right.
For me, I'm kind of brownish. It's not like, they call Asians yellow, but I'm more like a light brown.
Right.
Or a little darker tan. And so it was really not about my skin color as much as the shape of my eyes. And I realized everything had to do with the way I looked when it came to how people see me. They would look at my physical characteristics of my two eyes. And so I said, man, I'm going to write about that. How people focus on different characteristics, and then that's how they get stereotyped, and then this monolith is created.
Yes. You talked about how there was pressure to be whitewashed. And, one of my favorite scenes from Alex Haley's miniseries Roots, you and I are about the same age, so you probably remember when that came out in the 70s. But the scene where the slave owner was trying to convince Kunta that his name was Toby. And he refused to say it. He refused to say that. It's interesting, as I've listened to Lou Gossett Jr. and LeVar Burton talk about that scene, they let the cameras roll because things went off script a little bit. And the crying and some of the wailing that was taking place in there was so poignant that it was real, and they just captured it. Yeah. But the whole idea is Black people watch that. I think in 8th grade, I had the epiphany that I can't allow myself to be whitewashed. Again, to my listeners, and Dave, you don't have to do any disclaimers here because our listeners listen to get a perspective that they don't normally get. But for us, we don't mind fitting in. We understand code switching. But to me, the epiphany was that black was dirty, black was sordid, black was wrong, black was backwards, black was slow as pejorative, and white was right. And I was able to understand that they were trying to beat the only thing that kept him and our people alive and sane. That was a deep connection with Mother Africa and all of the riches and intuition and strength that it provided. And I think that continues to be a real fight. And so when other groups come, I mentioned Northern Europeans, but when like your family came, when Koreans come and they're told to just assimilate, and many times by your family and by society, when you do, you are rewarded by being called a model minority. Like it's for the whole group, a model minority. If I succeed, I'm a credit to my race and I'm an anomaly. But there's just this sense now that Asian Americans, and I'm not grouping them all, I'm saying that facetiously because you all have been so grouped, that you're the model minority because you get it right. It really means you have assimilated, and it means you have not posed a threat to the white status quo. And so in order to further lull, in your case, Koreans asleep, you're rewarded. And then with that reward comes the expectation that your children and your grandchildren and your friends and people are going to do really well here because you're from the model minority. And then that separates many folks from Asia, from folks who are African, descendants. And it sort of put us at odds together. That's a lot of history and background. But I want our listeners who have not really delved into a conversation with friends and brothers who, you're from Asia, I'm from Africa, and I have certainly a lot of European ancestry in me too. But that reality of your group and being called model put us at direct odds with each other, and it helped to push your place in society. How much of that did you know before writing this book, or how much of it did you come to understand as you realized the benefit and the pressure of being considered a model minority by being Asian?
Well, I think I used to take pride in how that was often stated when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
How just look at the Asians, how they're working hard and they're really good with education. But as over the last 10 years, though, we realized they weaponized that stereotype to go against the black community, and to say to pit us against the black community, and when
right.
the reality was, we have people in poverty, we have people that don't go to school or are not as educated, we have people that have lower IQ than maybe others. And so to me, they use that whole trope basically to, I think, weaponize their attacks upon the black community. And when the truth is, we were suffering in a lot of ways that I think people didn't realize.
Yes. And I love, Dave, that your book brought that out in such a vulnerable way. As you're talking about, your family moved around a bit. You lived out west, you lived in California, you lived in Texas. I hope I'm getting those states right. You're a good athlete. You played on the football team. But then you also talk about, people making, fun of your eyes. And I think one of the things that is important for people to understand is that those kinds of things when you're a kid may sound like just jokes, and we laugh at them so that we don't cry or get mad or go off or get in trouble. But those taunts happen when we're not thinking about race. And then when they happen, we're triggered and we remember, wow, they see me as other. I just thought I was on the football team. I just thought I was a fellow jock. I just thought we were here in the locker room and we're brothers and we're just all here showering, getting dressed, and we're a team. But when those issues come out about skin and eyes and those kinds of things, it alienates you in just a moment, in a moment's time. And the folks saying it and the folks witnessing it being said don't even realize what's happened to someone. So talk to me a little bit about accounts that you talked about in your book of where comments and jokes came out of nowhere that were painful, not just because they were insulting, but because they were divisive and separated you from people who you saw as close friends up until that moment?
Yeah, sometimes it's so subtle, and then other times it's super blatant. And, it could be this how you're excluded from certain activities that, other people in the majority are doing. That they don't even look at you. They look past you. So sometimes it's not even being seen. The second thing is, I think sometimes people don't have to say anything. It's just the way they look at you. I remember vividly as a child, driving along the freeway, and then kids doing slant eyes, as they're passing by, and then the parents doing the same thing, laughing.
The parents did the same thing.
Yeah, the parents would do the same thing, and it just shocked me. And so I think the way. Did you ask how did I deal with it?
Yes.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was I internalized it. I don't know if I had a place to talk about it. I just internalized. I didn't talk to my parents about it. I just inside of me, I told myself, I got to do better. I got to prove myself, and whether it's academically or athletically, I got to make it, even though I have this wave, a majority group of people that don't even recognize me.
David, reading your book, I realized how many similarities there are between my Black culture, my African American culture, and your Korean American culture. Like, as Black people, we don't have the word Han, and I know you wrote a chapter about that, this collective sense of pain. But if I'm watching the news and I hear that there's a bank robbery, and they describe the assailant as Black male, medium build, 5'8", 5'9", 50s. I either feel like I'm caught up in being, looked at suspiciously, or I feel a great sense of pain when something happens to a Black group of folks. And it can be in Florida, it can be in New York, it can be in California. There's a sense of connectedness. Talk to me and our listeners about Han and what that does in connecting folks who are Korean, and that's a Korean concept. I don't know if that's. I would not assume that that's necessarily shared by other folks from East Asia, but that Han is pretty much a Korean reality, correct?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back a long time with Koreans.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
It's frequently translated around this idea of regret, sorrow, grief, spite, resentment. It can even be rancor. But there's really it's a concept. There's no real English equivalent of it. But it's this we think this is an essential element of Korean identity. It's just. You feel it. I remember not being able to put words to it when I was younger, but I remember when my mom would cry. It's she didn't have to say anything, but there was not only where there's a sense of in her moaning or groaning, there was this deep pain that was not only her pain, but it felt like it was a generational pain. It was so deep.
Right.
And so that's what I think it is. They say Koreans share this deep suffering. It's a generational suffering and pain.
That gave me some wonderful insights into Korean culture. And Dave, some of the things that you wrote about, much of what you write about is just really universal as well. You talk about your relationship with your dad. You talk about your relationship with your mom, your relationship with your teammates, your relationship with pastors in your church. You talk about forgiveness. I'm wondering, of these different various subsets, what was the most difficult for you to write about? The forgiveness of your dad, and I don't want to spoil it for people, so you got to click the link to get the book. But was it forgiving your dad for things that went down in your family? Was it forgiving your stepmother? Was it wrestling with just your mom and her relationship and how life went for her? What would you say was the toughest subject matter of this book to write?
I think it was the moment before I felt she was going to die.
That premonition piece,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
freaked me out.
yeah. I literally, it was like my sophomore year. No, it was the beginning of my, it was the summer before my sophomore year in college. And I remember right at the beginning of that, I just felt in my soul, Mom's not going to make it. And, she was in her, I think, later 40s at that time. But,
Wow.
and so, but I could see that she was deteriorating in terms of her health. And so I didn't know what was going to happen, but I just felt like, man, this woman could just die from grief. And, but yeah, so I had premonitions, and I remember writing it, and I started losing it just writing that chapter. And then
I can imagine.
and then, you do the audible stuff, right? And the guy that
Yes.
was recording me from the publisher, I was reading that chapter, and he goes, "Whoa, we got to stop, man."
Yeah.
Because he got wrecked, and then because I literally started crying as I was reading
Yeah.
it, and so yeah, it was so deep because I remember that moment, how I just said, "This is my last time I'm gonna see my mom," and I just I lost it.
Yeah. That word you use, is it nunchi? Is that the right pronunciation? Nunchi? For premonition. Nunchi. You talked about this dark premonition. And when you talked about you know, after that premonition, again, I'm not giving too much information out, but that she still had with her a card you had written her, that part wrecked me, Dave. That part that it was still there, just showing that she was always thinking about you and so proud of you and had that with her. That was such a unifying piece because I think so many people, so many of us, irrespective of our backgrounds, hold our moms in great regard. But I just feel you told that with such powerful vulnerability that it just made that pain universal, man.
Yeah, yeah, because when she did pass on, that that to find that card in her purse,
Yeah,
from the tragic thing that happened. I won't give all the information.
sure,
And the tragic thing that happened, yeah, I lost it there again. She used to
sure.
she was always thinking about me. Later, when I talked to the people who came to the funeral, I'm sure it's like when when your mom passed, all these people are telling you what she did or what she
Right,
said.
right.
And most of the people are always coming to me saying, "Your mom always talked about you. She was so proud of you guys. She had pictures. She shows all the pictures of you guys all the time, especially when you went to school. Because I was like the first one that went to college.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm sure it's like I'm not sure if
Sure.
it's in your family.
Oh, definitely, definitely. You know, Dave, it's so interesting in the black community. We are so trained at home to not let white folks in our business. And again, since it's my podcast, my audience knows that I talk like that. To not let white folks in your business. Now, as a kid, I just thought I didn't give much thought to it. I just thought I'm going to pay attention and do what my mom says. As I got older, I realized there was a deep-seated fear that if I said the wrong thing or too much, a social worker, a police officer, or someone would show up and take me out of the home. It's why as a 6-year-old man, I still will get a receipt and a bag at Walgreens, because now I know the fear was if I were ever accused of stealing and I couldn't prove that I really purchased it, the fear was I'd end up in the back of a police car and my family could not get to me and protect me. So for a number of reasons, black folks were told, you keep your mouth shut on some of these issues. So even when I wrote Justified Anger and I talked about my experiences with white folks and how black people feel about it and what we say about it when no one else is in the room, I feared that some of my black friends would say, you went out there and told all our family business. When you wrote The Shape of My Eyes, did you get pushback from Koreans or Korean Americans saying, Dave, you told too much. You made us look weak. You made us look vulnerable. You took something away from us. I'm just curious, did you get any pushback from going out there and telling the world how some Asians and Asian Americans think about life and see life?
It's interesting. The majority, I haven't heard any negative yet, but the majority of feedback I'm getting is, hey man, your story is my story. I mean, different people, different situations,
Yeah.
but you're giving us language for things I didn't talk about.
Wow.
And makes me, and you don't know how much joy I get when I hear that, because that was my hope, is that people would find healing as they read this, because there's things that I think we just bury,
Yes.
we cover up for whatever reason, and I feel this is the reason why we have a lot of like addictions, or we have anxiety, is because we have these poisonous things that are lurking in our soul that we never healed. And I think part of it's these hidden stories that we were afraid to dig into. But yeah, so to hear them talk about, yeah, man, you elevating this, you sharing it, really heals something inside of me. I said, whoa, this is going way deeper than I thought.
Hey, good people. You're hearing this message from me because you're enjoying a Black Like Me podcast episode. And like so many people throughout the U.S. and around the world, you're perhaps enjoying and benefiting from these honest conversations between everyday extraordinary Black people and how they navigate our world. It actually takes a lot of work and creativity to produce an amazing podcast episode for your personal and professional enrichment and enjoyment. But you can help lighten the load by pausing for a moment and considering the benefit of this podcast to you, and then clicking on the Patreon link in the show notes to become a supporter of the podcast. Listeners make this show enjoyable, but it's supporters that make it possible. For as little as $2 a month, you can help make this award-winning podcast even better. So take a moment and think about what this podcast means to you, how you respect it and how you look forward to it and how it gives you great insights. Click that link and support at a level that's commensurate with your benefit. Contrary to popular belief, podcasts are far from free, and their impact is far more than merely nominal. So I invite you to take a moment, join with me in making this podcast even more powerful, even more polished, and even more popular. We want to take these conversations around the world, and you can be a part of that. Click the links now. Now, Dave, as long as we've known each other, we've always talked about your brother, your younger brother, who is biracial, so a Korean parent, a white parent. So he looked more white than what we would think you would look as Korean. And I think he was blonde. Was he brunette? Was he blonde?
No, he had darker hair.
He had darker hair. But do you think some of the pressures were different for him because of how he looked and looked more of what people might call American? Do you think he felt more of that he got a pass that perhaps you didn't by looking more fully Korean?
Absolutely. There's no doubt that he did, because his eyes were like my dad's. So, he was thought of either as like some type of white, darker skin mix, or Hispanic. Like they think he's Mexican or Latino. And then, he got a literal pass, when in university. When, the university at that time thought we both were 50-50 in terms of racially, Caucasian and Asian. But he was able to date, and then I wasn't able to date cross-racially.
Tell me more about that, because you went to school settings where interracial dating, I think of all the many things you talked about in your book, I got the insights into your perspective and how you experience that as someone who's being told initially you had to choose to either date white or Asian, right? That was a conservative Christian setting.
And what's sad about that even that alone wasn't alarming to me. It was like I settled into it. So to me, I think number one, that I wouldn't raise that as, what the heck? I knew it was already horrible, but it didn't affect me. So that's where I think I wasn't going to play with it, because, dude, I can date white. Originally they said, hey, since you're half, you can date white. And so I wasn't going to, stir anything up. But to me, that was sad. When I look back, So I think in part, what happened is when they did call me in the office and say, you can't date anymore, it was based on a Supreme Court case that was going on in the early 80s where the Supreme Court said that they couldn't have tax exempt status if they had a no interracial dating policy. And so that's when they called me into the office because media was coming in on the campus, and this is now national news on the major networks. And so they were looking for a voice within the community, within the university. And remember, this was the largest Christian university in America at the time. And so, and it was a right-wing fundamentalist type of style and culture. And so, in the midst of that, they called me into the office, I was fighting for my own life basically, I only cared about myself. But suddenly, as I was diving into this, and as time passed on, I realized it really wasn't initially an Asian issue. We were kind of like collateral damage. And I dug into this and I found out that after the Brown versus the Board of Education, the desegregation law, Bob Jones did not abide by that until 71 through 75.
Crazy. Like almost
And
20 years later.
and then this is for couples only. They said black couples, not single black. And then I was thinking, oh, you know what? And because I realized I was putting the pieces together, there was this guy named Billy Kim, who was a famous Korean evangelist that went to Bob Jones in the 50s. And he married white, and he was still considered, as far as I understand, like a hero, like a leader that they always commended, even though he married white, because he went to Bob Jones Academy, as I understand it, and then Bob Jones University. And so I was thinking, you know what? This wasn't initially an interracial thing, really. This was a black thing. And that's when I felt total empathy and heartache that I wasn't alerted to what my black brothers and sisters were going through. And I didn't understand the systemic injustice at that time that had been going on in our country for over 400 years. And that rocked me. And so I've always had close friendships with a lot of my black friends in schools. I don't know, just naturally, it wasn't like I'm going after it. It's just naturally I was connected. But this took me to another level. I said the black community has to face things that we may face it as Asians, but it's different because it's like they have a heightened level of scrutiny almost with general society within America. And there's a real division that was more clear to me, not only in terms of, I think, what I was seeing, but more dangerously, systemically, within government, religion, economics, the whole aspect that I just did not have a clue about.
Wow. So Dave, I want to make sure we just drill into this so that it's really clear for the people that are listening. Your insight was that rule was really instituted so that black people would not marry white people at that school.
Yeah.
And then they made it more general, like no interracial dating. But it really started off, I guess in particular, that black men probably wouldn't marry white women. But the whole idea was to keep the blacks and the whites apart.
Yeah, that was to me. That's like I don't see any other path that why they would do that. When you look historically at what they did.
Dave, that aha at a young age. 18, 19, 20, college students are thinking about a lot of things, their careers, grad school, if they want to get married, dating, all those things. That was pretty insightful for you as a young person to look at what they were telling you about dating, Becca, who's now your wife. You two have been married, 40 years almost?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I fully understood, even when I was that age, Alex. I think it progressed.
Sure.
I don't know when it hit me, but I think everything, when the George Floyd moment happened during the pandemic, and this is decades later.
Sure.
I think I had all these feelings and thoughts, but then everything just flashed in front of me. It's like suddenly, all these things that I was thinking,
Epiphany.
that I never really talked about, they're all internal. But it was like it just blew up and said, okay, do you see now? Everything you were thinking, you didn't even talk about or really reason about, this is the reality. And that's when I just started weeping, because I felt when I did see some of that when I was younger, again, there wasn't clarity around the depth of it. And then the sad thing was, I don't think I acted upon that as strongly as I could have or wish I would have.
Sure, sure. And again, you don't know what what it is you don't know, but throughout the book, you made references, and I wasn't expecting this because it was your memoir about what shaped you. But several instances, you talked about, this makes me think about this rule, or this was designed for Black people, or wow, this was designed to keep us apart. Because one of the things I said as a comment after reading your book, I sent you a note on this, and I said, I think that Gibbons has set a platform for a national discussion between Black and Asian American leaders about how we need to talk about the past and where we're going in the future. Because your ahas, I felt, built a bridge between our experiences, but not that we needed it validated, because our words were not enough, and often open-minded, sincere white academicians have written books. I think about Tim Tyson and others who have written books about how we need to understand what's happening in the Black community. Yeah. But we have not seen a lot of Korean American folks talk about their Han, their relationships with pain, being teased about their eyes not fitting in, and then saying, I wonder what this is. I wonder if this is what it was like, but even differently for Black people. That bridging, I thought, was really brilliant. And I still do think that there's a need for a national discussion about how Blacks and Asians work more closely together, particularly as we saw many of the attacks on Asians and Asian Americans. And what was brought to light was the silence by the Black community in many instances. And some of those, if not many of those, were perpetrated by the Black community. And never is that justified. Never is that fair or okay. I'm not saying that at all. But when all of that was happening, I thought we missed the moment to collaborate. And people are just assuming you're two different groups of people of color. You should be able to work together. I'm like, well, wait. After decades of being pushed to different neighborhoods, different schools, different expectations, now just because we're all darker than Europeans, you expect us to work together? We walked away from that opportunity to really understand each other's Han and to collaborate so that it creates a sense of strength so that we can fight against systemic racism together. But I don't think it's too late for us to work together on that, Dave.
No, not at all. I think, from our friendship, I think we've become a stronger force together.
Right.
And we, to me, I've seen that. And it's funny, even people I work with now in the marketplace, I think the combination of our cultures coming together enhance like our power. And, because there's, when you look from just a global macro perspective, even the Asians, it's like the majority population around the world. And so and then you're seeing this from the economy, America's moved by what's happening in Asia in terms of economics.
Right.
I remember when I was working in the markets, the commodity markets, when we would work at the Chicago Board of Trade, when there was rumors that China was just going to buy like a commodity like wheat or soybean, it would just send it into a tizzy, man. The markets would just start to go up immediately when there was just rumors of China buying something. So now, 15, 20 years later, since that moment, there's no doubt like Asia is a major player, not only in terms of economics, but now culture shaping. So with the majority minority happening, even though Asians are like 10% of the, I think, U.S. population, they wield a lot of power because of where they, many of them are positioned in the systems.
Dave, you wrote this memoir to just explain who you are and how you think and how you function. It's a response to a diagnosis of having been traumatized. But inside this, and I've alluded to this before, is this beautiful nugget of having an aha about the Black community's struggle in America and the sometimes broken relationships between our two communities. Do you feel that among your Asian American, particularly, we'll keep it specific, Korean American friends and colleagues, do you think that they're following your line of thinking as you talk about the connection and the bridging? And I know it takes a while, so it's not like it's bad if people don't get it, but I'm curious if your response from people from folks in your community is, Dave, I've never thought about that in terms of how we're linked to the Black community. Or I never thought about how we were pitted against each other. We were model, we were considered model, and they were always problematic and poor and needed to be lifted and raised and supported. Do you see people following your line of reasoning of bridging your experience to a broader Black experience?
Most of the community I associate with, I would say yes. Mm-hmm. But I think there's a large contingent that, if you look at first generation Koreans, for example, I would say a lot of them may not understand completely or get it. And there still may be latent prejudice and racism, even with first generation.
Right.
But if you're talking second, third generation Koreans, I think many of them have been educated here. They have Black friends and they have a high respect for the Black community. And so you see that, like even during the Black Lives Matter movement, you saw a lot of Asians walking in step as allies, with the Black community, and very aggressive and very vocal. So I think it depends like who you're looking at in these subcultures of Asians.
Sure. And Dave, some of that support from the Asian American community goes back to the civil rights movement. Like I can remember seeing a photo in the history books where there's an Asian American man, I believe he was Japanese American, with a Black clenched fist raised, and he had a sign that said "Yellow Peril stands with Black power." And so it shows this whole concept of working together is not new. There's just one other area I want to touch upon, but before I do, I'm curious. You've got the floor, access to a whole lot of people through this particular podcast. What would you want to say to Asian Americans about Black Asian relationships, and what would you want to say to Black people about Black Asian relations if you had a chance just to speak frankly? You're a coach and a pastor, so you know how to put things in a way that motivates people. I'm curious, what would you say to your community, and what would you say to my community about the opportunities of us working together and being more understanding and loving of each other?
Yeah, so many ways to approach that. I think the thing that motivates maybe me right now, I think we live in the midst of what they call the fourth turning. Some sociologists, meaning that it's like the moment of chaos and total destruction of institutions and ideas. And so what that means is it's a prelude to creativity. And so to me, most people who don't make it get paralyzed in fear, or they fight it and they stay within their own subculture. When in reality, if you study historically, like with the Medici family, they brought together different cultures, different spheres of society. And when those clashes of cultures came together, that sparked the Renaissance movement. So the Dark Ages really, to me, shifted into an awakening when people started coming together from very different cultures. So my encouragement to whether they're Asian, Black, Brown, whatever culture they're coming from, is if you really want to be ready for this moment, don't be paralyzed by fear. Step into these cultures that you're totally unfamiliar with, locally and globally. Go to the restaurants, the foods that you've never eaten. Listen to the stories in your neighborhood, these neighborhoods nearby you, because you can be in the Middle West and have a Laotian or Cambodian, or like the problematic situation we're hearing how Trump handled the Haitian thing in Springfield, Ohio. You can go, if you go and place yourself into these environments and not impose any type of strategy for them or try to tell them how to make their life better, but you just come and listen, be a friend, listen to them, learn from them, love them. What's going to happen is it's going to come back to you 100-fold, where you're going to get insights and strategies and vision to take you out of your own malaise or struggles of what you're dealing with in this current moment in our world.
Wow. Man, that's really some powerfully insightful stuff, Dave. Just one more question about the interracial dating, and just your thought about how that's so limiting. Did you ever look at that and think they're afraid that I'm going to taint their race? I know that there's rules about not getting together, not getting married, but there's still a reason for that. Just because someone who's Korean marries someone white doesn't mean the world is going to end. But when we're not allowed into stuff, or when we're told that, we're often thinking, wow, the thought is we'll bring the race down, or we will somehow taint it. Was that ever in your mind when you were told you couldn't date your college sweetheart who is now your wife? Were you thinking that the fear, even though it was rooted in, not wanting blacks and whites to be connected, but did you think about it in terms of what the perception was of what your race would do to their race if you and Becca were to have children, and you do have beautiful children? Have you ever looked at it from that perspective?
Yeah, it was more like not tank them, but I guess it kind of is that. It was more like this idea of they think we're going to take over, and and so they're holding on to everything they can because we're going to take over their business. It's like the Asians are coming. Watch out. They're gonna be your employer. They're gonna buy your houses. They're gonna take over the school systems.
They're going to be your doctors.
They're gonna be your doctors and lawyers. And so yes, I think they're afraid of that. I think it's probably primal and normal. Because every one of us want to survive.
Sure.
But my guess is that it was a fear. For sure.
Yeah. Dave, you and I are both key pastors in our community, and we know that there are fringes in our faith tradition. We're both Christian pastors who support, and they want to make America great again, and they see Trump as, a tool of God and all of these kinds of things. We're also hoping in our work that we're showing folks that that's not a monolith, that that's not how all Christians think, and that we really do care about society. And you wrote this book for the misfits in the world because you wanted to create an environment, a faith environment where that could be a haven for misfits. I mean, I've known you for years. I've worshiped with you for years. I've preached at your church for years. We've traveled to Korea together. We've done a lot of things together. And I could come to your church and see someone who has a signed record deal with a big record label, and then someone with a tattoo on their faces, and like we're all interacting and singing and and having our kumbaya moments and experiences. But talk to me a little bit about your heart for the misfits, because we talked about your mom and your dad and forgiveness and all the various themes about race, but really knowing you want to create a space where everyone fits in. And I believe by understanding your own identity, it shows where you didn't always fit in. So I feel that this journey of telling your story has made you more relatable to the misfits. But just take a moment and explain just your deep desire to see people and to love people. And when you say misfits, that's not a degradation. You're talking about how they're often seen in society, but you feel compelled to really gather and build community with people who have not always felt a community, felt like they were part of a community, a healthy community.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you had to say too at the beginning of that. Regarding this marriage that we see in America between nationalism and religion.
Right.
To me, I'm so with you on this, man. As I understand the scriptures, you know, it's too often people have distorted it because they've used the scriptures to serve political ideologies that have nothing to do with what Christ talked about or what he tried to communicate. He was always about love and seeking justice, caring for the widows, the outsiders. And that's really, I think what he's been about. He was never about empire. It's like my friend Shane Claiborne says, you can never see Jesus say, make Rome great again. But yeah, man, so the misfit thing to me, I don't think I have a natural gravitational pull. And then there's also something I think I have to fight. That's because it's not convenient or necessarily comfortable at sometimes. Because sometimes you just want to hang and be with your own people, like
Right.
kind of cultural thing. So I think some of it is there's like this tension of you have to like force yourself, discipline yourself to step into these uncomfortable situations. But I think it evolved from first my mom, seeing her as the ultimate outsider. Especially when my dad divorced her, and then she was suddenly not only a Korean immigrant, she was a woman, and now she's divorced. Okay, so she had like this triple strike against her, and so I said, and then I saw how people interacted with her. It changed the relationship, and I said, someday if I do like important work, I want it to reflect this a community that could receive someone like my mom, that would give her access to all the resources she would need. So that vision of my mom always was in my head. And then when I found out from a theological perspective that there's this foundational principle that, a lot of our friends that have churches, they would, if you look at their constitutions of the mandate within their governance, it says they base it upon this one scripture: love God, love your neighbor as yourself. And then when I studied that, I said, the neighbor here isn't like what we've been told, just to build big churches.
You're absolutely right.
Someone like you. It's actually someone not like you, because he told the Good Samaritan story. And that just fundamentally, I said, you know what? Just like I bought this, I allowed this idea of racism to exist without me speaking up as boldly when I was younger. I said, I think I did that. I didn't know this, but this same thing happened when it came to my understanding of my neighbor, because we were taught that we just got to build this demographic of people like us, and that's how you're going to have a big church. But then when I unpacked that, I go, man, it's the exact opposite of that. Jesus was saying, what's the big deal if you can love someone like you? People really see me when you can love your neighbor who's not like you. And then that's when I said, man, this is going to be my mission, man. I'm going to be all about trying to love people not like me. And I've been, to me, rewarded for that. Like, I feel like I have the greatest fulfillment because I have so many good friends that I'm learning from, that that I've received from, just because I have a relationship with them and they're not from my culture.
I've seen you do interviews like with young Jeezy, or you did an interview with Kobe Bryant. Like your networks are really are broad, and so I know I'm feeling what you're saying. Dave, you're not a new writer. This is not your first book. Like your Monkey and the Fish and other books I've had a chance to read. But yet there's a lot of excitement around this one, and it's not like it's just a new shiny thing. So I guess when you think about The Shape of My Eyes, what will you use as a marker 3-4 years down the road to say, wow, that was really successful? Besides being like a bestseller on Amazon, what are some of the indicators that you look at and you think, wow, that accomplished what I hoped it would? What would some of that look like?
Well, first, that my wife and my kids would feel like, hey, Dad, you told the story right. Something connected to me. That they feel like this was something special. That mattered to me. On a larger scale, I wanted those who felt lost to find home. That
Absolutely.
somehow, some way that the things that they didn't know how to communicate and codify, that maybe as they went into my story, that they would get language, and in that ability to get the language, that they would be able to communicate some of the hidden things in their own hearts, and then find healing and hope.
I love it. I love it. Sometimes people feel that just through the mere process of osmosis, if we work together, if our cubicles are near each other, our offices, we'll become friends and somehow intertwine. But I think stories are really key to people really getting a chance to know each other. And I think in Black culture, in our music, in our dance, in our plays, we're trying to tell our stories. We're trying to put ourselves out there. Even with this podcast, Black Like Me, it's not, the title isn't Black Only or Don't Y'all Wish Y'all Were Black. It's Black Like Me, so that people understand that, yeah, there's some uniquenesses, but there are a lot of things that we do that other groups did as well. But it's in sharing our stories. It's in knowing your story and you're knowing my story that I feel that's how we really get connected. And so my desire for folks is that they would read The Shape of My Eyes, that they would click the link, go buy it, go get it, and process it. And not just go buy it and give it and share it with your Asian American friends. You read it to understand it, because it's really about finding a sense of home. And so I want to encourage folks to do that. But I'm glad that you gave us some indication, Dave, of what success would feel like for you with this book, because I believe that it has been successful, but that it's going to be successful because it bridges so many gaps. It brings so many people together. But as it helps to broaden that base and that foundation for Black people and Asian people to talk about how we work together, how we process the past honestly, but only for the sake for just huddling up and moving together, I want you to remember that I said to you, Dave, I think this is a platform for a new discussion, because there's so much that we can do together, not against white people, but against systemic racism. And if we understand what we've done together, if the non-Black community understands what our civil rights movement and actions and putting our lives on the line has done for other underrepresented group and folks who were immigrants and who were international family members, if people understood what we did to make this place fair for everyone, and if we believe that those folks saw our dignity and not let white America taint our views in their eyes and your eyes, if we can move beyond that, there's so much good that we can do in the community. And I'm just hoping that you, in this book, in your relationships, will help us move closer to that reality, Dave.
Thank you, my brother. Well, I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for your story, for your life, for your hard work over the years. You staying in one place. Even though I tried to get you out of California.
Yes, you did. You should have tried harder. You did. You tried hard.
I know. I did a hard sell, but you did not bite, man. But yeah, man, I appreciate you so much. Your family. I love you, man. You're my brother. I'm looking forward to our next engagement together when we go whitewater rafting.
Wait, what?
Yeah, didn't we talk about that?
No, we didn't. We did. Wait. We got to find some black water rafting, because that sounds daunting on so many levels. White water rafting? No, dude, let's do something like a picnicking, or I don't know, barbecue contest. Let's do something a little bit safe. On the next tour, on the next thing, let's do something that's black. Let's do something that's not so dangerous, Dave. But no, I'm down for it, Dave. I'm down because it's always a good time, man. It's always a good time. So, Dave, man, this is great. I wish you every success. I really appreciate the time that you've taken to write this, to share it. And it's just been my honor to be a part of celebrating it with you. And I think it's meaningful, and it just gives voice to the story of millions of people in our country and from around the world who need to hear it. So kudos to you. And I know we'll continue to keep in touch and egging each other on as we reach for newer heights. And I just want to say to folks who are in Southern California or are going to be visiting Dave's ministry that meets in Santa Ana. And for folks who are not religious, you know what? That's who Dave caters to. Dave is like, my people, because that's not who he is either. But if you just ever feel like you want to be in a very diverse, economically, ethnically diverse organization that's got the influence of a lot of Asian American and Southern Californian influence, and you want to be in a faith environment or check it out without feeling weird or ostracized or like you've got to, adhere to some principles to just visit, you really should check out New Song. I'll put a link for New Song in here as well. But if you're in Southern California, if you do go, ask for Pastor Dave and say, I listened to you on Black Like Me. But I guarantee you won't be the same, and you will have a powerful experience. And when I'm in Southern California, I try to do my best to connect, because New Song, they're my people. They're my people. Sometimes when I'm out there, Dave will call me and say, "Hey, Alex, you want to go to this meeting tonight?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I'm playing tennis tonight with Tony and with Ho, and I can't go tonight because I'm hanging out with Dave's congregants because they're my people." So if you're in Southern California and you want to feel like you belong, you got some people out there that you haven't even met yet. So please go check them out. Dave, my love to Becca and you and my friends out there on your team, your staff, and the great work that you're doing. Your church is coming up on its 30th anniversary, and I'm so, so proud of you and what you all are doing. Keep up the good work, and let's have you back on the show down the road when you launch this into either some workshops or seminars or whatever it is. I want to be able to follow the success of this book. So thank you for your time today.
You're welcome, my brother. See you soon.
All right. Take care. I want to issue a very personal and emphatic invitation to the private Facebook group. I want you to join this conversation and take it beyond just listening to the podcast, but really entering into the next phase of it by having a conversation with fellow listeners and getting their take on what they heard or what they'd like to hear more of. We have a good number of people, but my goal is to really get a lot of people. Like, I like to get to 50 people in just the next few weeks. All right. So please take a moment, click the link, and then join and say hello, pose a question to me, lure me in. But I want you to come because that's important to me and to this experience. I want to take a moment to also offer special thank yous to my wonderful team of folks who helped me bring this powerful podcast to you on the regular. Eli Steenlich, who's in charge of social media, editing, and production. Jeremy Holliday, who helps with research, editing, and production. Don Thornton, who handles guest invites and production. Ariana Proctor, who's in charge of creating and moderating the listener space. And Jakisha Hunt, who's in charge of my merch. She's in charge of making sure that we get you stocked with some good Black Like Me merchandise in the not too distant future. I want you to have a great day. I want you to lean in. We're offering this information so you can become a part of the kind of community you want to belong to and be a part of. All right. Have a great day. And thank you for listening to Black Like Me podcast with Dr. Alex G.
Black Like Me. Black like me.
I want to thank you for taking time to listen to this episode of Black Like Me podcast with Dr. Alex G. If you like that opening track of our theme song, you can show your appreciation to Corey Saffold, who created that and produced it, and Marcus Fleming, my cousin, who's on vocals. I also want to say that this podcast was started with the generous support of the Human Family Unity Foundation, and so we always want to stop and thank them for that. For the many patrons who support us through our Patreon page, thank you, thank you, thank you. You don't just listen, but you support, you lean in, and you help this podcast to be what it is. And then I need to thank you, the listeners, who make a point of downloading this, listening to it, and sharing it. Without all of you, this podcast would not be what it is and what it's becoming. Thank you so much.